Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this event. So today, Caroline is going to share with us some basics and strategies of testifying. And this is an event I am organizing for the advocacy SIG of WATESOL. I'm the new advocacy SIG chair for WATESOL, and this is also my first year with WATESOL. So for my background, I am right now an assistant teaching professor at Georgetown University in the Educational Transformation Program. My connection to ESOL and TESOL is that I have been and currently also I work in teacher education in preparing ESL teachers for DC schools. I also sort of teach policy and advocacy students, so that's why I have a combined interest in like ESL teaching and policy and advocacy. And enough about me. So our speaker today is Caroline PRYOR, and she is an advocate, organizer, and former fourth grade teacher. She serves as the lead organizer at Empower Ed, fighting for teacher voice in all things education, as well as the co-chair of Fair Budget Coalition's Education Issue Group and the co-chair of the Defend DC Education Coalition. In her role, she works closely with Empower Ed's cohort of teacher leader fellows as they craft and execute their policy agenda. She's passionate about how we can forge racial justice futures for both our students and our educators, and cherishes her work with the Rest and Rise Black Educators Group, which she designed and launched in the fall of 2024. Caroline comes from a family of DC educators whose stories inform her work. In her free time, she enjoys hiking, cooking, and exploring DC's museums. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And I will then now hand the floor to Caroline.
Thank you, Mingshu. And the one thing missing from that, I hate bios. They feel so like stuffy to me. But the one thing missing from that is that Mingshu was my professor in grad school. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. I think we just had someone hop on. So Jack, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat or out loud.
Hello, I'm Jack.
Hi, Jack. Yeah, my name is Caroline. My pronouns are she, her. I'm gonna share screen and hopefully sound in a few minutes, but let me know. Hold on. I don't know if it'll let me share my sound. See. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? See me? Let me do this 1 second because I'm not sharing I don't want to share the whole screen. Let's do that. Okay, awesome. So thank you all for being here today. A little bit of background on, my work. A lot of our work is bringing educators to seats of power, and that includes DC hearings. And I'll offer the caveat that we today are going to be looking at how to testify at the local level, so at DC Council and the state board possibly also. But I do not have experience testifying federally or anything like that. I think really the easiest entry point really is DC Council. And these are some of the things that we are working towards. But we're in the middle of our budget oversight hearings. So tomorrow is the first education budget oversight hearing. It's going to be for the Deputy Mayor of Education, the State Board, Public Charter School Board. But these are our opportunities to tell DC Council what they really need to put their funding towards. So the mayor's budget was just released on Tuesday. It's not great for education. It's pretty bare bones. And so this is our opportunity to tell the DC Council what they need to add into her budget in order to fully fund education. So state superintendents of education's hearing is going to be on Wednesday. If you would like to testify at the end, if you're feeling confident, give me a shout and we can get you signed up for Monday. Monday is the deadline to sign up for the OSCE hearing on Wednesday, and then the DCPS hearing, which I'm not sure anyone here is at DCPS, but that's going to be on Friday. Okay, what is at stake federally? And this comes from the TESOL website. So thank you, Dr. Ding, for helping me with this. But Title III language acquisition funding targeted for elimination, Title II adult education state grant funding targeted for elimination, Title 1.C migrant education funding, Title II for all professional development, and then the education and cultural exchange funding. Not targeted for elimination, but basically elimination at 90% cuts. And if anyone has any more information that they want to drop in the chat, please do. Generally, there is a lot that is being cut for public education. And so it's really important that we stand up as educators and fight back against that. Locally, again, an extremely bare bones education budget. So for example, our literacy program, early literacy, was just cut from the mayor's budget. The experiential learning fund, where educators are able to apply for one-time funding and get some funds for a field trip for project-based learning, that has been cut. Community schools, I'm saying that it's cut. I cannot find any budget line item for it in the budget, so it does not look like that is receiving funding right now. Wraparound supports, except for high impact tutoring, funding for charters, and I know that we have some adult serving schools represented here, but looking into that a little bit more. So before we begin, and I know I just threw a lot of information at people, I would love to know either in the chat or you can come off mute. And let me make sure that I can see the chat right now because I cannot. But I would love to, and actually, Mingju, if you could read off anything in the chat, that would be really helpful for me. But what brought you here today? And then also an emoji that you associate with the idea of testifying, because I know that can be really scary for people who are new to that. So we'll give it a moment. Yep. That was definitely my reaction as well, Max. And for those that can't access like the emoji in the chat, you can just drop an adjective. How are you feeling about the concept of testifying? Ooh. All right, Jack, is that an excited, like I'm ready to knock down some doors?
Very much so.
Check out this video next.
All right. Well, we can move on. Feel free to continue dropping your reactions as we move through. I'm going to do my best to, pause and make this a little bit interactive as we go along. I know it's Zoom format, so we'll do our best here. But okay, Kathleen, maybe a little nervous. All right. Well, our objectives today are just to understand the basics of the DC budget oversight hearing. All right, Uni, curious. Understand some of the types and goals of testimony, and then some effective components of how to write and deliver a testimony. Hopefully, if you are excited, we can begin drafting our own testimonies at the end, but just a little bit about the basics. At its very, very simplest, a testimony is basically just a formal elevator pitch. It should not be something that causes a lot of stress, especially as members of the public where you are not on the hot seat. So there's really only 3 central components that you need in a testimony. That is who you are, what you want, and why it matters. And just like a table or a chair, if you have less than 3 legs, it's going to fall apart. So we really do need all 3 of these components to make sure that your testimony is as strong as it can be. Before I started my current job, I had never written a testimony. I had never delivered a testimony. Since then, I honestly cannot count how many I've delivered or helped people write. But what I did was I went through a bunch of effective testimonies that I found on GC Council's website, and I sort of analyzed them backwards, planned, figured out what were the most effective components, and it was these three things. So this is always what we tell our teachers. At its most basic, this is what you need. I also want to give a little bit of background on like how we frame testimony in our advocacy. So testimony is what we call an inside game because it's applying pressure from inside of the system. You're not breaking any rules. You're really coloring inside the lines with a testimony. So a testimony is really effective to get your point across. It's not super effective to build mass support. So if you have a topic that you really, really care about and you want to win a bunch of people to your cause, you need to build that mass support outside of the testimony framework. So for example, we hold some rallies sometimes and we have teachers come speak. We have campaigns where we just have people chalking all over the city or putting up posters all over the city so that people get familiar with the concept, they get familiar with a project that they want to fight for. And then once you have that mass support, we can go ahead and testify. And if everyone is saying the same thing, if it's a repeated message, that becomes a really effective strategy for council to hear and say, okay, this is something people really want. This is something that we should put in our budget. This is something we should pay attention to. So a little bit of a broader campaign is really helpful in pursuing a testimony, but at the same time, even if you are the only person that is testifying on a certain subject, it is still really valuable and it's still something that the public needs to hear. So testimony is always worthwhile, and I think it's a skill that you can continue to get better at. I'm continuing to get better at so that your message really sticks. All right, I'm gonna pause here to see if there's any questions before we talk about the two types of testimony. Okay, not seeing any questions. There are two types of testimony, the ones that you often see on the news. If you're one of those people that watches C-SPAN, which unfortunately I am not one of those people. But if you are, you're often going to see what's called an expert testimony. And if you are giving expert testimony, you have to be invited in. So it has to be the council saying, we want you on this expert panel. Just come talk about XYZ. Come talk about a topic. An expert testifier is going to just present their research. So it's supposed to be an objective testimony. You're presenting some sort of data or best practices. And the power of your testimony really comes from your resume. You're presenting this sort of very dry information, and you can add in some context to it. But critically, an expert testimony is not very fun because you're not presenting an ask. For the public testimony, if you are a community member, anyone here in this room, you get to present an ask. You get to go before council and say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. I need you to fund this. I need you to support our students this way. And what really drives your testimony as a member of the public is your story and your emotion. It is actually less effective if you are a community member to come in and present a bunch of statistics and research and facts than to share your lived experience in your story. That is where the power of your testimony comes from. That is what makes it memorable, and that is what sticks with council. So you can feel free to add in a couple of statistics, some research, but the central framework for your testimony as a member of the public really needs to be highlighting your own experience. And in that way, it's actually a lot more approachable than a big research project as an expert witness. So the thing that characterizes a public testimony, and the thing that I often see people missing if they have, never testified before, is the ask. So you have to examine what you want out of a testimony. What are you hoping to get? If you forget to ask for a concrete change, then unfortunately, sometimes a decision maker will say, well, you're just sitting there complaining. I don't know what you want me to do about this. I mean, thanks for sharing your story, but I don't know what to do as a result. What the policymaker wants you to do is to give them a concrete direction. So share your story and then say, as a result, I need you to do this. That's really important because it also gives you a chance as a member of the public to hold policymakers accountable. I asked you to do this. Are you going to follow through? This is what my students need you to do. Are you going to go ahead and do it? Are you going to put money behind it? Are you going to put energy and resources behind it? Otherwise, you're just sharing your story in a very public venue, and that can be really intimidating, and you may or may not get something out of it. So we always have to remember to include the ask. Here are some examples of things that we are fighting for at Empower Ed this year. So we're fighting for community schools, wraparound supports for our students so that families can, receive resources that they need, healthcare, food access directly in their schools, equity of well-rounded learning experiences. So I talked a little bit about that fund where you can apply directly for, money to take your students on a field trip, to get project-based learning materials. That's something that our teachers thought up last year, advocated for, testified about, and that the council funded this past year. The mayor took it out of her budget this year, so we have to fight again to get it to continue, but it's affected hundreds of classrooms, and so that's been really effective. Educator wellness and retention, something that we are continually fighting for. If our students are seeing high turnover in their schools, they're not really getting a stable education, and educators aren't really getting to practice their craft and feel stable. Fully staffed schools so that people are not giving up their planning time to go cover for a staff, a peer who's out. Visas for immigrant educators, that's something that was sunsetted, a pilot that was sunsetted. So Dr. Dang, I'll have to follow up with you about that to see if you have any more information. But one of the unions here has put forward an ask $200,000 to restore that program so that educators have a path towards a green card. Expanding safe passage, and then just fighting some of the federal threats that we're seeing coming down from Congress. So if there is anything here that you are excited to testify about, that you are excited to advocate for, I would love to hear it. If you want to drop in the chat, if you want to come off mute. And then I'm also going to ask if there's anything that we haven't listed that you feel like we should be fighting for. And this can be something to continue to think about as we move through this presentation. But if there is a problem in your school that you are noticing, roles that AmeriCorps staff filled in schools. Yep. AmeriCorps funding is getting slashed. And so that becomes, some sudden vacancies that we're going to need to fill. So thank you, Kathleen. That is a very good point. Yep. Yeah, I think the really hard thing with this, teacher turnover, whatever is driving it, is just seeing those relationships that get lost with students as people are pushed out. And we talk a lot about student push out, but there are also conditions for educator push out, and they primarily affect Black and Brown educators first. So thank you for raising that. Anyone else? Okay. So the next thing that we always ask our teachers to consider when you are forming your ask is to know your audience. You have to know who you are advocating before and what their role or scope really is. So I'll give an example. We are currently, as I said, we're currently preparing teachers to provide testimonies for the Deputy Mayor of Education and the State Board of Education. I had some teachers write testimony about a retention fund that we are pushing for. That retention fund is an ask for another agency, for OSSI. So we have to know what our audience is, where we are directing the ask. We have to now direct that testimony to a different hearing. It's great. She's got her testimony done for next week. But some other examples, we often hear people go before the state board and ask for a policy change or a funding change. The state board is not able to, the state board has no teeth, essentially. They cannot write their own policy. They cannot direct funding. They can produce research. But if you are going before the state board and you are asking for, $5 million for X, Y, and Z, they're not the body to be asking. So knowing your audience is also really effective, and it shows that you've done a little bit of research, that you're prepared, that you know what you're doing as a member of the public who is testifying. Oh, I don't know if this is, oh no. I don't know if my audio is gonna work. But the next thing I was gonna do is play this video with a bunch of stitches of our teachers that are talking. So let me stop sharing and see if I can fix my audio. But in the meantime, I would love to hear a little bit more about some issues that you're seeing at your school, or any sort of especially funding threats as we're coming up on the budget oversight hearings, anything that you're seeing or hearing at your schools that might cause a little concern for next year, or that gives you a lot of energy to advocate for. Yes, no, maybe. All right. Let me try one more time with this. And if this doesn't work, Mingxu, do you have the ability to share audio?
Sorry. I could try if you can send me the link to the video.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think say that again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. I think, you know what, the problem seemed to be my microphone, my speaker.
You could try again. If it doesn't work, you can send me the link to the video and I could try.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. Could you hear it the first time it started to play?
No.
Okay, let's see what we can do here. Okay.
Support.
Can you hear it?
Teacher support.
Awesome.
Teacher support. Teacher support. Shall I say it again? Teacher support. This is one reason why teacher retention is a serious problem.
Teacher retention is important to me because more often than not, children receive the brunt of this choice. This leaves students and families anxious and worried if their child's new teacher will provide the same level of care and comfort. Novice teachers may feel unsupported, whereas the seasoned teachers would like to stay but ultimately feel overwhelmed and underpaid. Each time I left a school district, I was forced out because of unlivable wages as well as a fuzzy work-life balance. I have seen quality educators leave mid-year repetitively, and the looming question is, if you can count on me to deliver quality education, why must I have to fight for equitable treatment?
Schools and thus teachers are being asked to solve all of society's ills, and yet are not the ones with the power or the resources to do so. We have a crisis where teachers are not feeling like this job is sustainable. It is a toxic and at times abusive workplace. If we want teachers to stay, which we need if we want an educated society, teachers need to have a healthy workplace, because let's not forget that teachers are still just humans who show up every day to do a job. Effective teaching and learning cannot happen if both sides are stressed. Our students are not well. And the more we continue to test them and then punish teachers, the more unwell everyone continues to be.
As a lifelong DC resident, I remember when veteran DCPS teachers were let go, and the resulting impact was that instead of students having teachers that taught their entire families, students now had to learn from a new teacher who most often was not a part of that community. Schools are similar to sports teams in that what appears to be a subtle change can have a big impact. When schools are working, the people at that school are working together in the same direction, and losing a teacher can derail that fast.
When teachers are supported and families are involved, our students thrive. Focus on teacher retention with the added positive impacts of the expansion of community and connected school models helps support all stakeholders. One of the most effective ways that you can do this, retain teachers, is to continue to expand and support the community schools model. We need to support teachers by providing widespread wraparound support services for students that actually allow our teachers to focus on instruction.
I am struggling because I see such a focus on test score numbers and data with no recognition of the many factors that goes into a child's score raising a single point. I see such a focus on standardization and easy numerical data to tell progress when I have my kids coming to me joking about how they're not going to be able to get their homework done at home tonight because the air conditioning and the electricity are shut off again because their parents can't afford the bills. You judge progress by test scores, and I have kids who aren't getting 3 square meals a day.
As an educator, I wake up some mornings taking an over-hour commute and overwhelmed by low pay, but come in not only to be an educator, but a therapist, IT support, club coordinator, and more, as well as limited resources when budgets are getting smaller each year.
DC is sitting on a gold mine of talent, intelligence, and ingenuity in both students and teachers, but we lack the resources necessary to keep our teachers in the district. The future of DC is dependent on an educational system that cares enough about their scholars to take care of the teachers and support staff who care for our scholars. Teachers are tired. They're tired of fighting to get what they need to effectively teach. They are tired of worrying about budget cuts. They are tired of feeling that their emotional needs are not being considered. And they are tired of feeling that education in DC is at the bottom of the list of budget priorities. Education should be at the top of the list. Thank you so much for your time. I welcome any questions.
Teachers are leaving. And when asked about why they were leaving, there were many reasons teachers listed over the years. In one study, many teachers named poor working conditions and lack of autonomy in lower income schools.
We all know that teacher retention is a critical issue, especially at DC, where turnover is particularly high in schools like mine that serve predominantly Black and brown students. We also need to address the working conditions that drive teachers to leave. As a third-year DCPS educator, I can definitively say that one of the biggest contributors to the stress I experience on a daily basis is our impact evaluation system. In an ideal world, we would abolish impact altogether.
I'm here to ask that the council get rid of impact and allow the WTU to bargain for our teacher evaluation system, expand community schools, and create an educator retention fund.
I've absolutely loved my time in the classroom. They've made me a stronger and more resilient person. I built confidence in myself and built friendships and families that will last me a lifetime. But I've not always loved being a DCPS teacher. Working with educators across DC through Empower Ed has shown me that there are countless solutions being offered to address the very issues that have drained me. Please listen to those solutions today and continue to prioritize the lived experiences of the people who are working so hard to stay in your district, who do not want to leave, but who will without the support they need. Thank you very much.
Okay. Could anyone guess what the topic of that hearing was? The stress of evaluations, that is a major one. Yes. And the teacher changeover actually was the topic of this hearing. It was a hearing about teacher retention. And yeah, the cause of discontinuity is something that we have really tried to draw focus to as an organization, is figuring out like why teachers feel like they are pushed out when they want to stay and they want to be able to support their students. So we talked earlier about how there are 3 components of a testimony: who you are, what you want, and why it matters. So I'm curious, and I have some discussion questions here, but I'm curious if anyone could identify a couple of asks. What made the stories that were shared effective? Any opportunities for improvement? And I recognize that we stitched together a whole bunch of different testimonies, but I'm curious about, you know, what nuggets stuck with you and what, if any, asks that you could identify from that video. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so we can see each other.
I will share. I feel like the part that really stuck for me was when the teacher mentioned how was sharing her story of commuting for 1 hour, being at the school, and then have to be the teacher, the mother, the tech support, everything for their students. That was, I think, a really, powerful story.
Yeah. I think part of the benefit of really leading with lived experience in your testimony is that you force people who have never been in the shoes of an educator to really sit with what that looks like in the day-to-day. We have had a lot of conversations with council members where we're advocating for something like co-teaching, and they're like, wait a second, you need a co-teacher in order to use the bathroom during the day? You can't just leave the classroom? It's like mind-boggling to some of them. And so any opportunity to really like humanize this and share those little details that feel kind of, everyday to us is really, really effective. I'm also going to draw attention to something that Max put in the chat, which is the repeated mention. When we continue to repeat those asks and have multiple people sharing them, again, it really sort of builds momentum and it becomes sort of an earworm for the decision makers that are hearing your testimonies.
Something that I noticed, it's not necessarily related to the testimony per se, but I noticed that everyone was reading from their testimony, which of course is fine, but they say that eyes are the gateway to the soul. So if you're reading, you're going like this, and you're not really paying attention, and you're not really delivering the emotion of what you could be doing if you were trying to make eye contact with the person you were talking to.
Yeah, thank you. That is a really good delivery note. And I think there's a couple of considerations there that I'm thinking of. One, if you are testifying virtually and you have your, if you're not used to testifying, if you're nervous, if you don't want to worry about memorizing 3 minutes worth of content, and you want to make sure that you have everything before you, it is really helpful to have a written testimony. I actually don't see anyone just go off the cuff or have something memorized when I'm testifying at these council hearings or the state board hearings. People always have their thoughts written down. But I also notice that the people who testify routinely are much more comfortable making eye contact, looking up, and making sure to continue to really like draw in those council members and sometimes like really hold eye contact. And that's really effective because I've also seen sometimes decision makers, and I won't name names, but some of them like walk out, some of them close their eyes. And we want to make sure that we're really engaging with them. I'll also note if this is something that you are really worried about, virtual testimonies have some pros and cons. One of the pros is your testimony is you're looking at your screen, you're looking at your camera, they're more or less the same. You are more likely to look directly at the people that you are testifying to. You're still behind a screen. And so in that sense, it's a little bit less effective, but it is enormously helpful for actually making sure educators can testify. If you're testifying from your classroom, if we have managed to push a hearing to after school, which we always push for teachers to be able to testify after school, if you're still in aftercare, if you're operating like the after school program at your school, virtual is critical. So there's some pros and cons to different forms of testimonies, but thank you for raising that. That is really important. Okay, any other reactions?
What struck me is how really hard it is to be a teacher. And as Mingzhu was saying, an hour commute because it's so expensive to live in the city. And then when you get there, children who haven't eaten or have other things on their minds when you want to teach. And then at the end of the semester, at the end of the session, the year, you've got this evaluation with a list of things that you have to do well. And sometimes it's not always easy, given the reality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, one of the asks that our DCPS teachers often make is to get rid of impact, which is the evaluation system that DCPS uses, and use a different evaluation system because we want to make sure that we have quality teachers. But impact has been proven in multiple university studies to be driving out teachers in Title I schools, and Black teachers facilitated the mass push out of a lot of Black veteran educators in DC. And we have one charter teacher who pretty much refuses to teach at DCPS because his parents were pushed out of DCPS as educators because of that. So there's a lot of layers to this, but there's also a lot of avenues to enter this work, and I think that's also really helpful. Okay. So when we're looking at how we actually write and structure a testimony, which we're going to turn to a little bit more in the last half of this training, again, we have our 3 components: who you are, why this matters, and what you want. You do always want to close with your ask. You want to make sure that you are, it's, what is it? The peak end bias is like the, I think, psychology perspective, but whatever you say at the end is usually the stickiest. And so that's always what we want to leave people with. We'll look a little bit at our testimony guide in a moment. Before we do, I'm just going to offer a couple of ways that people can get involved. So as we discussed, you can testify live directly in front of the council members. You can sit at the dais. You can testify via Zoom. Record. If you cannot get over to a hearing, if you are, working during the day, if you are teaching, if you have grad students at night, whatever it is, you can always submit a written testimony for the record. And that's also really effective, and that gets posted online. Everyone can see it. So it is still publicly accessible, and getting the word out. And what I often do, if we have a hearing during the day that we cannot get teachers to, I'll often print out, I'm about to do this for tomorrow actually, I'm gonna actually print out all of their testimonies, staple it into a packet, and hand deliver it to the council members, because I can be there even if our teachers can't. And make sure that it really ends up directly on their desk. It doesn't just, end up posted on a website. Questions for organizing. If you have a topic that you want to organize your grad students for, that you want to organize your students for, consider how many people that you might need to get your message across and how you can appear as a unified group. You may have noticed in that video, a lot of our teachers were wearing a blue shirt because we wanted to present a unified front. You can also consider which submission type is most effective. If you are in person and right in front of them, they are more likely to engage with you. They are more likely to ask questions after your testimony. But also sometimes Zoom is really effective because, again, you are looking directly at the person. Your eyes are up when you're testifying on Zoom. And sometimes it makes it way more accessible for people that just cannot be there, cannot get down to the building. Okay, I'm going to share now. I think I want to look at this document here, which is our generic testimony help sheet. So this is how we structure for people who have never written a testimony before. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop this link in the chat as well so that people can take a look. And I'm always open to feedback on this. This template has changed a lot over the years, and it is highly structured. And if anyone has taught wit and wisdom before, it is based on the painted paragraph that we teach our 4th graders. So the first part here, your why. And I'll also share for the state board and for DC Council, you have 3 minutes to testify. So not a lot of time. It is really important to be structured with this and really edit it down. It often is a kill your darlings process where you are really having to go through line by line, strike out phrases, strike out sentences. And because you're presenting your lived experience, your story, that can be really difficult for people. But just some questions to get people started, some sentence starters. Start with who you are. Are you an educator, an administrator, a community member? Share where in the city you are or where in the city you teach. Because again, a lot of our educators cannot afford to live in DC, even if they teach here. Share your why. Share a sentence or two if you feel comfortable about your school community and your role in it. And again, you don't always have to name your school. Sometimes teachers feel a little uncomfortable naming what school they're at, what program they're at, because they don't want, you know, an administrator perhaps to go say, hey, I noticed that you mentioned our name here. I just want to make sure everything's okay. You don't have to name your school if you'd rather not. Any introductory information you feel is relevant. I had a teacher today send me a testimony where he said, I attended DC schools, elementary, middle, and high school in the same ward that I live in now, and I'm really proud of that. And that's a great detail to add here. Part 2, identifying a need. This is where you are stating your assessment of a problem. So, what is the problem that we are addressing? What is the impact this problem or challenge currently has on your story, your school, your community? And then this is where you can really get into that lived experience. This is where you are sharing some pieces of your story that directly connect to this need. The next few paragraphs, in order to solve this challenge, this is what I want. This is where you are giving your ask. It could be, I need you to start this new program. We have this idea for a completely new fund. We have this idea for a completely new grant. We need you to start supporting this student population more. And so we're asking you to do this. Start this program, whatever it may be. Or sometimes it might just be, I need you to support this bill that's on the table. But also I have a couple of edits and changes that I think you need to incorporate. So what suggestions do you have? Why would this action cause a meaningful change? This is really critical. You need to share the outcome and the possibilities for the future of your solution. And then what would this change mean to you and your community? Really humanizing it as well. Conclusion paragraph, again, always, always, always state your call to action, state your ask at the end. That's generally how it goes. I would love to hear if there's any questions on this, or if this is helpful, if this is too structured. We have some teachers that just don't like a template. They want to break free, that's fine. So this is just a guide to help people get started. No one is locked into this, of course, but I'm curious how this resonates or how this is landing with people. Does it make it less intimidating to have a template?
I think so. I would be a lot less nervous going into a testimony if, you know, if I practice and all of that, that certainly makes it easier. But if I don't have something like this, I wouldn't have the confidence that I had it organized correctly, or I was going to include what was useful. So yeah, I think this is really great.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad it seems relatively helpful to people. I'm gonna, let's see, I can also show you a little bit of our budget oversight toolkit, which is here. This gives a little bit more of an explanation of the differences in the types of hearings. So in March, we had our performance oversight hearings, which was just an opportunity to tell DC Council how each of our agencies were doing. And if you do want to testify and advocate on behalf of higher education, then the department to do it is OSSI. OSSI authorizes our local universities as well as higher education institutions. They authorize all of our educational institutions. So OSSI is the one. And there's also UDC is going to be tomorrow, but that ship has sailed. That deadline is closed. So we have our performance oversight hearings, which are just policy related, and then our budget oversight hearings now that the mayor's budget has been released, to really hone in on some of those dollar value asks. We always ask, and this, you know, if this is relevant for anyone who's also in higher ed, if you sign up to testify with us, if you want to, the benefit of that is then you have EmpowerEd's name attached to your you know, name on the witness list. We can move you to the very end of the hearing, i.e. these hearings start at 9:30 in the morning. And that's not effective if you are a teacher who is teaching at 9:30 in the morning. So if you say that you're a teacher, we can usually get people moved to the end of the day into those after school hours. And also you have a whole group of people that also are testifying with you. So that is really helpful, is finding a group that is advocating on something that you're interested in, who will help capacity build, who can do a lot of that interfacing. If you're like, oh my gosh, I need to switch from, virtual to written, then that organization can contact council office and switch that around on the back end for you. We just took a look here at our testimony template and guide. One of the things that we do to, again, present a unified front is to always make sure that we format everything with the same header. So people have the capacity to testify about whatever they want. We have a whole bunch of talking points here that are listed by agency, but you can testify about what matters to you. And just by making sure that you are, testifying in a group, it sort of lends some energy behind your ask too, because then council knows that your ask is part of a larger group of people that are also fighting for the same values. So I'm gonna pause here. We have about 10 minutes left for questions. And I'll also drop my email here. But if anyone has any questions, I'm always available by email or text pretty much all the time. And I'm welcome to, take any questions now too. Or feedback on whether or not this training was helpful.
How you mentioned in the part about knowing your audience about that one group is not responsible for making budgetary decisions or something, so you don't so kind of in line with that, like what do you do to make sure that like what you're asking for is something that could be done by the people you're speaking to, or maybe like I'm not saying, oh, we got to be pragmatic, we shouldn't aim high, but I mean, like, how do you go about determining if this is a not too unrealistic thing to ask for?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I think again, that's part of the benefit of like, if you want to testify, it's always helpful to find a group that does this work routinely and sort of knows which agency to direct your ask to. So if you're like really interested in out of school time, then DC Action is really great to plug into. There's a whole bunch of organizations, but in terms of figuring out which department to direct the ask to, I think it's really, I hate to say like follow the dollar, but that's often what it is. So for example, if you're like, I need to figure out, I have this idea for, what's something that we came up with? I have this idea for, a student mental health program. I really want to figure out how we can get that funded. I might look at where some other mental health programs are coming from, like sort of follow that dollar. Okay, there's, our mental health standards are coming from OSSI. So I bet that OSSI would also fund this program if I pitched it.
Okay.
So something like that. And I think in terms of whether or not something is realistic, we always we tell our teachers to like shoot pretty high. And then anyway, it still is like, if you give them a relatively low number, or a relatively, conservative idea, conservative cost, whatever it might be, they're probably going to bump it down a little bit more. So go just above the number that you want.
Okay. Make sure you're not asking for too little right out the gate. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question, I guess less about the technique, but more about the content.
Yeah.
Like for people who are involved in WATESOL, the issue of immigration is the elephant in the room. Like, it doesn't matter if you work with adult or K-12 students, or if you work at the refugee center and not, formal school system.
Yeah.
So if we're to testify for this issue, and then we also know with what's going on, we have, DC schools already have like a higher absenteeism, and what is the activities that's happening around DC schools is now contributing to like higher absenteeism if the students come from homes with mixed or immigration statuses. So I wonder just to what extent what could we ask about, like to what extent it is safe to ask? Sure, I just wonder if you could offer your insights for this, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that there is a push I can share to try and reinstate like the sanctuary city status that the mayor kind of rolled back on Tuesday. So if people want to get involved in that fight, I think that's one of the main ones. I think if you want to get involved in some of that work, there's a lot of really excellent grassroots work that's going on in sort of like rapid response and community care networks. There's a lot of legal trainings for family planning and things of that nature. In terms of testifying safely, I was talking with another organizer about that today. Her organization, their base is pretty much all immigrants, immigrant families, and parents. And so it's not always safe for them to testify. So often what organizers will do, you can either find a trusted friend to do this or an organization that will do this, but you can write a testimony, can take a person's name off of it, and then Mingju, you or I could go up and say, I'm going to testify on behalf of a community member who could not be here today because it is not safe for them to be here. And then you read off their statement. Something else that I've seen that happened recently at the state board, there were educators whose, visa sponsorship through DCPS's like green card pilot program that they've just revoked. They didn't feel that there's a very small number of them. I think it's like 20 or 30 people. And so they didn't feel comfortable coming forward directly. So another organizer, union member, compiled a bunch of their testimonies of their words, and she read all of them sort of in conjunction. So it was hard to tell whose testimony was, belonged to who, but the words got out there in a safe way for the public to hear. So protecting the identity of the people whose stories you are sharing, but making sure that those stories are still heard.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And like I said, I will make sure that you all get access to these slides, get access to our testimony template and my email, of course. So if you come up with any other questions later on, please feel free to send me an email. If you're wondering how you can get connected to an organization that, specializes in something we don't specialize in, I will do my best to connect you. But I'll close with saying it's really important that, decision makers hear from educators, from classroom educators, from, higher ed education. They really, really, really need to hear from those community members, and they very rarely do hear from us. So we love to get more educators sort of into this world.
Any comments? More closing words from everybody else? Jack, Paul?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here on your, what is today? Thursday night.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. This has been really interesting and useful.
Thank you. And Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Paul, for coming, and thank you, Max, for helping me organizing this event.
It was great. You did all the work. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.